If you look at polling, the most important factors to voters remain unchanged. It's the economy, it's inflation, it's the cost of goods, and it's jobs. It's those critical factors that even if you go further into polling and you ask people who did this, why did it happen, they blame Democrats. And so come November, considering that's what's top of mind, Mark Kelly and Maggie Hassan and all the other Democrats, Cortez Masto and Warnock, all have to defend the fact that the American people rightly blame the souring economy on them.
Erin Perrine, Vice President of TAG Strategies, joins us again tonight. Erin, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
You know, with our previous guests, I was making mention of the lack of faith in our institutions. That seems to be an increasing problem in our country. I don't know if polling is an institution, but there seems to be a lot less faith in polls these days as well. And I think a lot of it stems from Republicans' reticence to respond to the basic questions from pollsters. Are Republicans being undercounted as a general rule in polling these days?
That is certainly one theory, that Republicans are being undercounted. It's also, there's a theory that it's about how independents are modeling at the moment, right? Right now, when you're looking at most polling, independents are modeling more toward a conservative angle. It's also a matter, if we're going to get into the political science of it, of how they're weighting polls. What are they doing? Are they using likely voters versus registered voters? Are they looking at the propensity of the voter? How many times in the last, say, 2 of 4 or 4 of 4 years have they voted? Well, you've got to take a very, very fine look at polls to see what is actually valid. And at this point, since we're post-Labor Day, polls should start to be registered voters, not likely voters. There should be a reasonable split and weight within the polls of which party these people are either, depending on the state, registered at or modeled as, or how they self-identify. It's really critical that political scientists do their jobs right. Unfortunately, there has been the hidden Republican voter. They are more reticent to tell people what they think, and that makes it a much more complicated science in the long run.
You know, of all the political stories to watch in this upcoming election season, I think who holds the Senate is going to be perhaps the most important. We saw, largely because of Senator Sinema and Joe Manchin, the filibuster preserved in the Senate in this most recent session. And without the filibuster, our world would be entirely different. You would have seen all these Biden administration big ticket items passed. You would have seen, in all likelihood, a packed Supreme Court. You would have seen D.C. and Puerto Rico become states. Hugely big changes. So I'm watching that really closely. Let's examine some of the races that you've got your eye on for the Senate right now. What's the single most important one in your view?
I will say your analysis on the firewall that is the filibuster is absolutely spot on there. It is so crucial to maintaining the American democracy we know. Now, when we pivot and we start looking at key Senate races, obviously Pennsylvania is a big race for the country, not only because the candidates, but because what it represents. It's a hold seat. It's a hold seat for Republicans. Senator Toomey is retiring from that seat. It is now an open race. Can Republicans hold a Republican Senate seat in an off year, the off year being the non-presidential year, now that we're looking at the midterms in 22. Ohio's another big race. North Carolina, Georgia is looking more and more like it is going to go into a runoff, and we will not know because that polling, again, has closed so much, and with what their laws are, the likelihood of a runoff is pretty high there. There's so many dynamics across the country, but Pennsylvania really is an important one.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at some of the polling numbers. As much as I've been criticizing them, I'm using them. The 538 average has Warnock over Herschel Walker in Georgia by 2.7%, but he's been really closing the gap. Some other states, though, in Arizona, Mark Kelly, the Democratic incumbent, has an 8.1 lead over the Republican Blake Masters, again, according to the aggregate from 538. Colorado, Joe O'Dea, the Republican contender, is behind 8.6% to Michael Bennet. Nevada, Republican Attorney General Adam Laxalt, former Attorney General Adam Laxalt, is trying to unseat Cortez Masto, the Democrat. She has a 2.9 lead. New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, the incumbent Democrat, 6.1 lead over Don Bolduc, the Republican challenger. These are not good-looking numbers for Republicans.
Well, for a few of those, you're looking at incumbents, right? You're looking at Mark Kelly and Maggie Hassan. They're going to be up in the polling at this point, generally speaking. But also the 538, I would want to look at what their polls are and what their aggregates are on how they're doing. And I know they're generally considered a gold standard, but man, oh man, polling has become so much more less reliable to know if this is an outlier. Should it be considered part of the norm? Even if you look at things like Fox News, sometimes their polls can be way outside, but then it can be considered as part of an aggregate as well. You've got to make sure you're balancing all these things. Now is the time to start tuning into polling. Now that we're post-Labor Day, we're in the final push. That's what we're looking at. And if you look at polling, the most important factors to voters remain unchanged. It's the economy, it's inflation, it's the cost of goods, and it's jobs. It's those critical factors that even if you go further into polling and you ask people who did this, why did it happen, they blame Democrats. And so come November, considering that's what's top of mind, Mark Kelly and Maggie Hassan and all the other Democrats, Cortez Masto and Warnock, all have to defend the fact that the American people rightly blame the souring economy on them.
Mm-hmm. Last question for you. What's your thought about all of this early voting?
Early voting can become very treacherous, and there just needs to be protections in place to make sure that election integrity is protected. If that means that you have to apply for a ballot, that means you have to match a signature, it means you need an ID, which voter ID is overwhelmingly supported in this country. I'm fine if you need to early vote. I mean, I've had to vote absentee a lot living and working in politics. I moved all over the country, but I was a New York voter for a long time. So there are certainly reasons for absentee early voting or things like that. What we don't want is the market flooded with unrequested ballots that somebody else could fill back and send back in. So really, it's about protecting the election integrity. I think Election Day should be a shorter period of time, more toward the election instead of an election month. But that's just my personal belief on it.
Erin Perrine, Vice President, TAG Strategies. Always appreciate your perspective. Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.